Hello, I'm Chuck Phillip. Welcome to Southern Home Talk. This is the Southern Stories addition to the organic story I'm doing. And so I probably should have made this part one, but when I first started going to organic, I didn't take the bus. Pretty much a lot of the parents got together and worked out a carpool schedule. And some of these parents actually had station wagons. Now I remember carpooling with Libby Wilson. She was going to Daphne Junior High, but they only went to the ninth grade. And so instead of going to Fairhope High, she chose to go to organic. And this next slide, you'll see at the very top, that's Ford Cook. And his dad was over the water board back then, or director of it. And next to him at the top right is Glenda Ryland. She lived in the first house on the right as you come in the neighborhood. That's just past the old real estate office. And below them is Miss Clark, who was a teacher at Organic, and her daughter Nancy was also a student there. Now, they also ran an ambulance service out of their house. They lived just off Spanish Main, second house on the right on Cason Trace. And so I would stand up here at the top of the hill if it wasn't raining, so I could look up toward 31 to wait for my ride to come. But if it was raining, I'd go across the road, and they had a covered porch, and sometimes me and other students who went to different schools would stay there waiting for our ride. The people who lived there didn't mind us doing that. But when I was carpooling with Ford Cook, his mom had a yellow station wagon, and Ford got his driver's license, and he would come into the neighborhood with it, and I'd wait for him. And we started playing this little silly game between the two of us. We'd make these silly faces and grin at one another, and I thought it was making him mad, and as it turned out, we both thought it was kind of funny and comical. In fact, I was even doing that to him in the 80s when I'd run into him, and we still thought it was funny then. But back then, you didn't have a rear entrance, and so you had to come back out on the 31 side. So he was picking up other students here. I wasn't carpooling with him when he had his driver's license. I believe he was picking up Mike LaPlace and Tim in this other photograph, Tim Wampler. And so I would wait up here at this stop sign for his return trip back, and we'd play our grinning game again, and he'd finally go on to school, and I'd still be sitting there waiting for my ride. And so anyway, that's pretty much how it went back then when I first started organic. And so we're fixing to start pulling into my second grade classroom here in just a little bit. But I figured I'd share you this part of the story of how we just traveled back then and how we got back and forth to school. That might be something some of these parents should consider now to shorten the car line. Okay, I just made a right turn onto Bancroft off of Fairhope Avenue, and there's Gaston Ford sitting right there on the corner. The year is 1969, and welcome to the age of Aquarius. We're about to pull up to the front of our third grade building, but Miss Snow, which is a friend of mine's mom, she taught second and third grade, and I carpooled some with her. And this is a picture of Doug and Kathy, I believe, on the front of the Bell building. And so we're fixing to get out of the car and head to second grade 53 years later. All right, walking up here to the Gaston building. I believe this was built in the 1950s. They even call it G. I guess that stands for Gaston. But anyway, this is what I believe is the second grade classroom. I also went to school in this same room when I was going to Faulkner College. I think it was a math class I took there. And then the next room up would be the third grade, and that's the Gaston building sign. The real prominent family here in Fairhope owned Gaston Ford Motor. And so you pretty much just moved from one classroom up to the next, going from second to third. Now there's the placard that's on the wall. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. And this building's always been white, even though this is Clay City brick, which is an orange color brick. This was actually whitewashed at the time I was there, so if you leaned against it, you got chalk all over you. Now, that's looking back, north, and of course we had our class picture taken there. It's Miss Snow with our class. And we also had playground equipment out there. And so we had quite a bit of playtime, and that's one thing I liked about this school over Spanish Fort Elementary, because we had quite a bit of playtime, and it was a beautiful campus to actually get out here and enjoy this beautiful scenery that you're seeing right here. Not much has changed as far as that. Now, we'd have our snacks out here and also have our lunch. I never went to the school cafeteria that I recall until later on. I'm pretty sure I brought my lunch in the second and third grade. But the lunch room was actually where you're looking on the other side of that oak tree up on the hill. And so this is looking back toward the class. And you can see over the years there's been quite a few photographs taken in front of this thing. And there's been also quite a few students that's passed through this school. Now I got in a habit of looking for wild onions that grew in the ground, and I would pick them up out of the ground and clean them off and eat them. And I'd also get pine cones off these pine trees. There are massive pine cones and massive trees, and I'd eat the seeds out of those. And crack pecans. I had a lot of pecan trees at the time. Now they didn't have any sidewalks there when it was organic school, and so you pretty much walked dirt paths and the grass area. I went barefoot most of the time to keep my shoes from getting wet, and so did a lot of the other students. And so we're looking back toward the first grade and kindergarten class back there, and that was right behind this. I'm not sure which building was built first, but you can see all the windows on the back of this. We had no air conditioning, so we just pretty much opened up all the windows, and I don't remember it being too bad. So apparently there was enough windows there to create enough breeze to come through where we wasn't too miserable. And so I believe that tree was also there as well. It's probably a pretty good old live oak, and some of these trees the students probably planted back when the school started back in 1907. And so anyway, we're walking up to the first grade and kindergarten area. But also let me let you know this. I'm gotten in the habit of saying first grade, all these grades, but it actually went by lives. So this would be actually walking up to the first life classroom as we speak. And that's the placard on the wall. Hopefully you can read that as well, the Klearn building. And this one was also painted white or whitewashed white at the time. And I don't recall fraternizing any as a second grader with any of the first graders that were behind this, or the kindergarten students that were in this room here. And I could have these reversed. And so that's the door leading into that. And so these buildings haven't really changed much at all. Even the windows are probably the same. I got the wrought iron support post columns there. I was kind of admiring that a little bit while I was there. Some of my home inspector came out at me when I was doing this. I kept wanting to do an inspection on this. I'm so used to doing that. And that's why I've got the camera going up like I did, just looking at the architecture of it. And this front porch patio is pretty much the same. There was no sidewalk going between the two either. You can see there's some dead tree stumps out there between it. That's probably where hurricanes may have got it. Of course, this one does have air conditioning, so does the other one. Now they've actually added that. But you can see that red brick right there. That's Clay City brick, and they painted it. And a lot of the houses in Fairhope are made out of this, and they've either painted them or stuccoed over them. I guess they just didn't like the look at that orange colored brick back then. And so this is the back side of the first life. I'm going to start getting it right now in the kindergarten area. And there's a good old pecan tree there. That's where I would go and pick them up off the ground. And my dad taught me how to crack them with my hands. And you can see where they cut. There used to be doors that come off the back of this class, both the front one and the back one here. And they pretty much framed that in. So it's just all windows. Now that's looking out toward what I call the wilderness area. We built a cabin back here. But they also did folk dancing back here too. They did that all over the campus, just wherever they decided to do that is where they had it. And these trees that you're looking at right there are probably some that I planted back when I was going there. And I got to thinking, I said, well, these are some pretty darn big trees. I said, well, it's been 50 years, so that's why they're big. And now I'm sure that tree we're looking at right there in front was probably planted relatively recent, but these big tall ones are probably some that I planted back around 1970, 71. And so we're back in between the two buildings, and I'm actually looking at these stumps because I'm kind of sort of trying to compare some of the photographs that I have of the old photographs I was able to get off the albums. And so that's looking back toward the front of the kindergarten, first grade building. So I hope you've enjoyed this tour of first, second, and third life in kindergarten. Now, on another note, Miss Johnson, or Marietta, she was the first one, I believe, to start a kindergarten in the state of Alabama. And I could be wrong about that, but she was a big fan of the German guy, I think it's Mr. Phobel, and he was the one that actually really started the first kindergarten in Germany in the turn of the 1800s. And even kindergarten, I'm still calling it kinder, it's actually Kindergarten. It's a German word for kinder is kinder, and garden is garden, like we'd plant. And so she was a fan of him and drew a lot of information from him as well. And that's why they started a kindergarten here. I think in the 1950s is when that got started. All right, thanks for watching this, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this second part of this episode. And so I'm going to move on from here. I figured I would just do this story as I was a student there. And hopefully you'll find that interesting, because it's going to get interesting, guys. Just stay tuned to the next one.